Matt Zedeker, Superintendent of District 115. Thank you so much coming out. We finally are getting the weather we thought we were going to have on an evening tonight. So really just a sincere gratitude for people to come out and to engage in a conversation about our schools and our community. And we certainly want to make sure that all voices are here and voices from the community. So we really appreciate you coming out. As we talk about tonight, I really wanted to lay out kind of the process that we're going through with our facility master plan. At the top of the triangle, stakeholder listening. So this is one format of stakeholder listening that we've had. We have scheduled sessions at every individual building throughout the district, and then we've had staff-specific listening sessions as well. And those will continue through, I believe, February. And so through these listening sessions, what we're doing is we're gathering information and developing themes and some common themes that are coming out of those sessions. What we're able to do with those is we've created a steering committee that meets every single month. This steering committee is made up of teachers in the district, principals. We have 3 community members at large on the district. We have 2 board members. We have 2 students from the Superintendent Student Advisory Committee that are on there. And then we have some district office personnel. And this group, they're really charged with taking the information that we receive from these listening sessions, plus all of the data that we have gathered with our architects and all the demographers, things that we have. And they're working through some options for us and giving us brainstorming ideas about how are we going to solve our problems. We'll talk tonight about some of the challenges that this district is seeing. But that group is kind of the group that's guiding the work for us and giving us feedback, and which has been a great process so far. So then as we talk about options and we figure out, where are those ways that we can solve some of the issues that we have, we're going to bring back options this spring that the community will have an opportunity to see. We'll be able to present some large concepts for the community to be able to ask questions and to be able to preview. And then eventually this summer, we'll take it to the Board of Education for the board to approve an option for the facility master plan. And so we think this process so far has worked out really great. We've had some great participation and ideas through our stakeholder listening sessions, and the work is really going right now. Before we move on, I do want to do some introductions. I have Heather DeVerde, our Executive Director of Facilities. Craig Wesley is Assistant Superintendent of Business and Financial Services. And then Brody and Pat from Studio GC. Studio GC is our architects. They're our partners. They've done a lot of the behind-the-scenes data collection for us with our buildings and done assessments of all of our buildings. And so they will be a partner as we move through this process. And so tonight we're going to present some information to you. And then after we get everybody, kind of the same set of information, it really is going to be turned over for questions and comments from you all. This is an interactive session. We are filming this session, and that's why we have microphones. If you ever go to our district website, we have a facility-specific page. And all of our listening sessions are listed on there, and we actually upload these sessions to YouTube so that anybody can listen to what conversations are happening at the various buildings or various sessions. So we invite you to do so. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Pat from Studio GC to facilitate the first part of this conversation.
Thanks, Matt. You want me to advance my own slide? Terrific, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So oops, did I do that? Thank you. So the image you see on the screen is the development map that the City of Yorkville was kind enough to share with us. And these are the developments, both commercial and residential, in Yorkville over the past 10 years. I think there's a couple of pieces of information that relate to this that I think are important to consider. Where things are located are important, but what densities are provided for in each of those residential developments are probably more important. I think one of the big eye-opening things for us when we first got brought on board was the increase in population since 1990 in Yorkville. I mean, it's absolutely astounding. And then a recognition later, you'll see of when the district constructed the facilities that they currently operate and that the students are currently using. If you were to look at virtually any school district in the state of Illinois, you would find that the population of students and families are either static or declining, not here in Yorkville. And that is consistent. So there hasn't been a kind of a bump in the road. It's been a steady increase, at least for the last 10 years in particular, which again is the reason why we are here tonight talking about some of the challenges the district faces. So these are the statistics from the city of Yorkville, and recognizing that the district boundaries are a little bit bigger than the edges of Yorkville, but we're using Yorkville because that's where the density of the population is. These are the number of dwelling unit permits that have been issued in the past 10 years. So that's significant, right? Now, we're not saying that that is, equivalent to a child of every household, but what we are saying is as homes are occupied and then reoccupied or sold, we have the ability to garner more students, and that's clear because we know the population of students has grown significantly in the district. So I think this is just important to note, and there is no sign of slowing down. It does seem that Yorkville has the magic sauce. For some reason, people like and want to live here. It's a fantastic community. There's great amenities, great schools, and that's a problem on one hand, but it's a nice situation to be in, especially for those folks who are here and have been here for a long time, because the community, while it's getting larger, it's certainly getting more assets. So when we look at that same trajectory for projected student growth, the district back in around 2021 hired a demographer by the name of Dr. Casarda out of University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Does a lot of demographic work across the country. And he began to look at this growth trend that was happening in Yorkville. And these were his projections based on where the district was going. And he wasn't that far off. But because the district has been very prudent in how they are approaching this, they are in the process of working with another demographer to do a verification. I don't know how many of you know anything about Lincoln Way and the things that happened down in Mokina. They built a high school, and the high school was built, and there were no kids. They overshot the projections and overbuilt the district, and the taxpayers were very upset. That is not what Yorkville is doing. What Yorkville is doing is a very methodical, strategic approach to how we look at these options that Matt talked about earlier, but more importantly, how that looks over a 5 and 10 year period. We don't just want to build and say, okay, we're going to have, 1,000 kids in 10 years, let's build for 1,000 kids. That's not how it works. And the steering committee is doing great work in kind of struggling with all that information. And it takes a little bit of time, it takes some iteration, but this is reality. And we know the kids are coming, and the buildings that we have certain capacities, and they're reaching their limits. So one of the things that we did when we first came on is really understand the need in the district. And the needs really fall in 2 categories. The first category is student population. Where are the kids? What grade levels are the students? Where are they being housed? How do we make sure that there's a place for them? The second is the district has 1.1 million square feet of inventory of existing buildings. And I will tell you that having walked virtually every inch with my team, your buildings are in outstanding shape. The district has done a great job of taking care of the facilities that it has. You certainly have a few that have some age to them, built in the 50s, early 50s to late 50s, and those need to be looked at objectively, because back then we built schools as neighborhood schools. Kids went home for lunch, right? These are the things that happen in schools, and now they no longer do those things. So if you're not going to allow kids to go home for lunch, there has to be a place for them to eat lunch. And now we have, lunch programs where kids get hot lunch at school, et cetera. So all those things have to be taken into consideration as we look at kind of the two types, in particular the elementary buildings, the ones that were built, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the ones that were built in the 50s, because they haven't, they've done a great job of maintaining it. So roofs, tuck pointing, HVAC, electrical, lighting, all those things are in great shape. Most districts that we do these studies for, you walk in and they have this huge issue with space, but they also haven't done anything to their buildings. So now you got this kind of twofold problem. And here, while there are some things to do, I think by and large, the district has put themselves in a good financial position because they've used the resources they've had to maintain the buildings they have. So this is a kind of a timeline that shows you kind of the age of your buildings. So, Bristol Grade School, Yorkville Grade School, the high school, Circle Center, those all kind of started from 1950, last edition in 1973. So those are the older parts of your facilities. Then there was kind of this, period up till about 1998 or 1994 rather, where then additions or improvements were made to the facilities. And then obviously we call what we fondly refer to as the sister schools. All of those schools, in addition to the middle school, were all constructed in the 2000s. So if we look backwards at how the district has approached growth, they've been pretty strategic, because Yorkville's largest growth was between kind of the year 2000 and 2010. The community grew by 10,000 people in that time frame. From 1990 to roughly the year 2000, they grew by about 4,000 people. And now from 2010 to today, we're looking at a growth of about 2,800 people. And what's interesting, when you look at the demographics of Yorkville are getting much younger. Much higher percentage of student age and family aged folks moving into your community that are having families. So we need to take all that into consideration, but I think the district is being quite prudent in getting a second demographer, because now the demographers have much more benefit by using technology and databases with live birth rates, being able to use GIS mapping and looking at where residents are and how they can kind of more pinpoint where the growth is happening. So we're going to get some really robust data to use as the steering committee continues its work. With that, I'll turn it over to Craig to talk a little bit about the finances.
Thank you, Pat. So school finance, I know that's not everyone's favorite topic. I understand that. So I have 4 slides to answer basically 3 or 4 questions. The questions that I always get: where does money come from? How do you spend it? What does your budget look like? Do you have a balanced budget? That's really, really important. And then how does this affect our taxes? So if you look at this is a current year's operating budget. You can see the green section, that's local revenue. The most significant portion of that is property taxes. You can see that's about $73 million in property taxes. That's everyone's tax bills, that's residential and commercial right here in Yorkville School District. The next portion of that is called CPPRT. That's corporate personal property replacement tax. It's existed since 1974. So essentially the state does an assessment of personal property, corporate personal property in the school district by industrial companies and commercial companies, and then they provide us that number. No one really knows where that comes from, but they give it to us every year. They give it to every school district every year, and so that's what our number is. And then the other portion here, that $5 million, that's local sources. So the biggest chunk of that is, as you can imagine, is our interest income from our investments. So this year we'll make about $3.2 million in interest income through really savvy investments. The other part of that would be like student fees, also gates like ticket revenue and that kind of thing. The next biggest section is our state sources. And in about 2007, the state changed how they funded schools. Yorkville has been fantastic in the growth because the evidence-based funding has supported that. So we've seen, in my 4 years, we've seen that evidence-based funding go from about 19 million to over 28 million. So when you look at the school funding formula, Yorkville is a big winner because we're growing, similar to what Pat just said. When other districts are shrinking, they're losing their evidence-based funding. In Yorkville, we're continuing to gain. The other section there for state sources, that is like categoricals, so it's special ed categoricals, reimbursements for transportation, some of that. The last item, the smallest sliver, is our federal dollars. And that is, we get special ed money, so from the IDA grant, we also get a National School Lunch Program, but our federal sliver is going down pretty significantly. So next question, okay, we understand where it comes from now, Craig. Where does it go? Well, we are a people business. So you can see that big chunk of green, greenish blue, that is salaries and benefits. So that's where the bulk of our money goes. And then the next section, the 16%, is purchase services. That's for anyone that comes in to do service in the school district. Two of our biggest ones is Septran. We don't own our own buses, so that's about a $10 million bill every year. That's natural gas, that's electricity, that's our water bill that's going up. You know, that's all in that yellow area. And then capital outlay is the repairs to the building. So that is our current year budget. And now probably my favorite slide. I always think about leading with this one, but this is our financial forecast. You can see the bluish green is our revenue. The orange is our expenditures based on, this is if there's no construction. If we just keep doing what we're exactly doing, we are anticipating a balanced budget moving forward. But we're here because we're gonna have to, that's gonna change. That 5-year forecast, those 3 years out, that's gonna change significantly as we bring on, put additions on, put new schools in. That will be, obviously our expenses will go up tremendously. And then my last slide is the EAV and tax rate. And this is probably the part that's most confusing, but I think what people need to understand is that when we talk about our tax rate, and you're gonna hear that when we talk about a referendum, if that's the direction the district ends up going, you're gonna hear people say, your tax rate isn't gonna increase. And that is true. Your tax rate has an inverse relationship with your home values. So your home values are higher than they've ever been, and your tax rate actually went down. I understand you're saying the tax rate went down. My taxes are higher than they probably ever have been. That is true, but when people talk about the tax rate, your tax rate in the bond and interest area, we're gonna pay off some bonds, all of our bonds in the next 2 or 3 years, and then we'll be able to reissue bonds if a referendum passes, and then our debt would remain the same level. So currently we're paying about $9 million a year for our bond and interest, and if we pass a referendum to build a school, then we're targeting that same $9 million, basically almost like having a mortgage, paying it off, and now you're gonna be able to buy another house with the same budget. So that's the concept. And I'm happy to answer any questions when we get to that portion. Next up is Pat.
So we would like to spend the rest of the evening together, as long as you would like to speak and share with us, getting some insights from you now that we've shared a little bit about what some of the challenges the district faces. So we have David, who has 2 microphones, who is ready to run down the aisle and share with you. If you have either questions on what we presented, really this is an opportunity to talk about anything. We just thought that this was important content because oftentimes, even though you live in a community, sometimes it grows around you. You kind of live your life and things happen, but anyone want to share with us a first question? Otherwise it's going to get real uncomfortable because I'm going to start walking much closer to you. And making you feel really uncomfortable. So, anyone have any thoughts to share?
I'll take questions, but I'm gonna go if we're gonna go, so.
All right, couple questions. In the budget for this year, does that count the money we spent for the land out on that line or, by the hospitals?
So that money has been expended. That's true. It's not there because that's in the operating fund. So I just showed the operating funds.
That's what you just said.
Right. So
It's the operating fund, that's our budget. You spent money and it's not in that budget you just showed.
so Fund 60 is so
Okay.
that's our capital fund. That's where that money came out of.
Right.
So I did not show the capital fund in there, but that's where that came from.
Don't you think you should?
Well, I can. I mean, it's in all of our reports.
So are you net positive after spending the money or not spending the money?
We are net positive, yes.
Even after that?
Yes.
All right. And we've talked a lot about field houses and adding on for the high school and that kind of stuff. And we came up the money for more land, but not the field house. Correct?
Correct. So
All right.
a
Go.
field
There you go.
a field house is going to cost about $40 million.
All right.
That property cost less than $4 million.
Okay. What's your ultimate plan for that land then? Idealistically, I know we're searching stuff out right now. Idealistically, what do we need 2 years, 4 years, 10 years from now?
I'll turn that over to Matt.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to figure out. Everybody
Yeah,
has.
but you know what the projections are. You know
Yeah,
what we
projection
need.
depends on how we solve the problem. So we have problems of overcrowding in every single one of our buildings.
Correct.
What we're figuring out is what is the best solution to solve that problem. And so whether on that new property, if it is a new middle school, that is the ultimate part of the solution. The new property isn't the only thing that's going to solve our facility master plan. So this facility master plan is going to touch every single building. The new property is a piece of that solution.
Sure.
And so what the work is right now and why we're getting feedback from the community and various stakeholders is there are multiple ways to solve the problem. We have to figure out what is the best way for Yorkville now and in the future, but also within financial means. And so that's the process we're going through. So it would be very premature for me to say this is what is going to go on there.
But you have an idealistic. What if you had the money and you could do it all? What would be your answer right now?
I don't have the answer because it's not my answer. It's the communities.
I think
So that's
that-
what we're
I think
figure
that's
out.
selling it a little
Yeah.
short and naive, but
Yep. I don't have any preconceived notions on what's going to go on that property. That's what this process is all about.
well, you bought the property though.
Yep. Yeah. To give us options. Otherwise, we were landlocked and we would have no option to build.
Well, you have that whole little where the buses are at the high school, all that land. You could
That's
have
not our
built
property.
something- Who owns that?
The cemetery.
And you just turn the buses around on a cemetery?
Yep. We have an agreement with them.
That's new to me. All right.
Yep.
At what point are we at a referendum that you think will clearly pass in Yorkville?
Oh, that's so the earliest that we would be able to go to referendum is in March of 26.
26.
Yep.
So we're not breaking ground on anything until 27, 28?
Nope. We'd like to break ground prior to that. We want to build this plan out and start to work on some of the logistics. So if we decide to make and head forward to that referendum, if that is a yes vote and we clear that referendum, we would like to break ground in 26.
And what do you think your chances of passing a property tax referendum in Yorkville are?
I have no idea right now.
Have you gone to listening sessions for that?
No, because that's way too far down the process. So
It's a year and a half.
Yeah. So we have to come up with what's the idea about what we're going to do with our facilities first, so that then as we engage the public with a referendum conversation, they have an idea of what we'll be using that money for. Right now, it's very abstract when we say we're just working on our facilities, we have property. So the first part of that process is that we need to have an understanding of what are we actually going to do. And if we ask the voters to vote for a property tax referendum, how are we going to use that money? I think it's very important for the voters to have an idea of what we're going to do with that money before we ask.
Yeah, but wouldn't you think that you should have asked the voters that before you bought the land?
No, because we wouldn't have any options to really go about that with
I mean,
with the voters.
there's a lot of cornfields in Yorkville. You can always buy land.
Yep,
But
no,
you chose to buy land
Yep.
and then say, let's figure out what to do with the land.
well, we knew there were options. We knew we were going to have to expand. And so in order to be able to have some real conversations, we needed the property to be able to do that. And so the board took action to work out that purchase.
I had two questions. One was, did we ever get property in Whispering Meadow? I heard when I first moved here that each like subdivision, when they built new subdivisions, they left land for the school districts, you know?
Yeah, we have 14 acres there.
Okay.
Yep. And the way that's situated by the railroad tracks, that's not an ideal spot for building. But we do have 14 acres by Whispering Meadows. That's correct.
And then the other was, I know overcrowding is a big one, is one of the things that the steering committee kind of deciding, like prioritizing the things that we'll do and figuring out whether like a new theater is high on the list, you know, just putting another little, if you're tallying, new theater up there high on the list of things we need to consider for our district.
Yep. And that's what tonight is also about as well. Community thoughts on that. But certainly I don't know that we've gone to a listening session that a new auditorium or theater hasn't been mentioned. So it's been very high on the priority list for folks.
Thank you. Anyone else have any? Thank you.
I may as well throw my 2 cents worth in. My name is Jerry Engelhardt. I've been a resident for 46 years of Yorkville. We had 5 kids that went through the school district, supported all of them, thought they did a very fine job in the 46 years of what we've done here. My concerns are that in that 46 years, the biggest thing that we had was always had to cut back and cut back and cut back, and every time we finally passed a referendum, it was just to the bare bones. And I would like to think that we would be realistic enough to look now to see what the future lies and to plan ahead for that. The second thing is I think that from a perspective of my thought is that where they purchased that land is actually excellent because I think it allows for a lot of opportunities in the area and would like to consider that. The third thing is I was involved in my previous life where I worked at. I was a district coordinator, and we went from in the 1990s, we had to build 18 new high schools, or 18 new schools, and 2 new high schools. And one of them we put an addition on, and it's been a disaster all the while of dealing with additions and the problems that go through with additions. And the second one was make sure it's big enough, whatever you do, to adequately supply the future needs for all 12 grades. So that's my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else have something to share? Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Shelley Augustine. I'm the director of the Yorkville Public Library. And has there been any thought about, well, first I have to preface this and say that Heather has been a huge help with us with our traffic situation at the library. But has there been thought of a traffic study being done
Yes.
around the area?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll have to do that with the new property as well, no matter what we do. So there's traffic studies are in our future as we look at all of the various buildings. Because you talk about traffic, just main roads, but we also talk about bus pattern traffic and
Right.
parking lot traffic.
Pick
So
up,
all of
drop
those
off.
things that we're going to try to consider as we look at each individual site plus existing sites.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I remember pre-COVID, we had started having boundary discussions. It was a big discussion, and I didn't know if, I know, lots of layers, but is that also, so not just the kids who are currently in our district, but is there a possibility that our boundaries may change so that there's even newer, like as things get redistrict or farmland gets turned into residential so that, I know you'll probably do that, but we were talking about changing who we decided was Yorkville and who wasn't in terms of Y115.
Yeah, so anytime you talk about your actual district boundaries, that's a very extensive process because a lot of that land, it's already zoned to go somewhere, whether that's Plano or Oswego or others. And so we're not focusing on trying to, necessarily redo our district boundaries. We certainly will have to look at our attendance boundaries where our kids currently go to school now, because with the growth and where kids may be in 5 years, in building new schools or potentially building new schools, those boundaries will ultimately have to change. And that's a conversation that certainly we're going to have to engage the community in. But our focus is not on trying to acquire more Yorkville, Y115 boundaries.
Did the information we shared tonight surprise you? No. Anything else the Board of Education should consider as we look at, as Matt talked about, these various options? Because there's a number of combinations of things that are under consideration as we look at elementary, middle, and high school. But is there anything that you would like to personally share with the Board of Education that they need to consider, or something that you feel is extremely important?
I think when it comes to planning for these new buildings, that it's important to look at the incoming growth that we'll see in the future, but also paying attention to the class sizes, not just the number of bodies, but how we're dividing those into classrooms, because some of these classes are just huge. It's so hard for the kids, the teachers. So hopefully that's something that we're taking into consideration. And then also with what Mr. Engelhardt said, in this school, when they were building this building, it was just a constant referendum of what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And they had to keep cutting back. And we moved in and it was almost already too small. So I just really hope that we're planning, that we're planning well for future growth, not just where we'll be that year when the building is finished.
Yeah. And I can assure you the steering committee is.
Thank you.
And that's the reason for getting a second demographer in, to try to get a little more precision with the numbers, because I think that's ultimately where this boils down to, is trying to get the number as close to be as accurate as possible. As the entire district builds out, more to the south where there's undeveloped land, there's a good chance there may need to be a school down south later, right? That's something you wouldn't necessarily consider today if there's no homes down there because of transportation. So I think part of this is look at not only what inventory we see, what the near-term inventory coming into the district is, but also the potential for expansion and growth in areas that are not under current consideration in terms of densities, to be able to do some prediction, because precision is important. We want to make sure that we do that to ensure that we're building adequate housing with proper, grade level capacities, but also setting the district up for success so that if there is continued growth, an increase in growth, there's a mechanism or a plan in place. So this plan isn't just looking at, here's a referendum, this is the plan we're going to propose, this is all we're going to do. This is a master plan, right? So we're looking at 5 and 10-year windows so that we can, share with the community exactly how this looks as the dominoes fall when they do. We don't want to do too much now and pay for something that may not house any students, but we certainly want to be able to predict when and where that might happen, because ultimately the board will be tackling, or a future board will need to tackle that. So thank you for that. Yes.
First of all, thank you for doing this for the community. Much appreciated. My name is Ross Stieber, and I've been a member of this community for about 8 years and have had 3 grandchildren go through the high school, one graduating this year. I've heard maybe I've missed it, so I just ask you to maybe repeat it if you have said it so that I hear it again. But you indicated that the steering committee is to come up with solutions to the problems. So if you could identify what are the top 4 problems that we're facing. I think an implied one is growth in students, but I sense that maybe there's some other things. Someone mentioned we don't have a performing arts center. I would echo that. But what are those again, if you could articulate? What are the problems that the steering committee have been charged with trying to find solutions to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So I would say the overarching one is the overcrowding. So no matter what building you're at in our district right now, we're either at capacity or have just, kind of gone over capacity. So that's the overarching issue that we're dealing with. But as you break it down underneath, to your point, some of the problems in terms of high school, we have three major things that we're looking at. No adequate performance facility for our fine arts programs. No athletic field house to be able to house more opportunities for our students. And then the board has put a priority on wanting to increase opportunities for students in career and technical education and seeing that expand. And the expansion of those types of opportunities takes different kind of spaces. So those are the 3 big problems at the high school. You talk to other people, they'll tell you the parking lot and 16-year-olds driving in the parking lot that we have to consider as well. But then as you filter down, the crowding at the middle school. And in many of our listening sessions, there have been questions about whether the district should stay 7-8 at the middle school or they should go to 6-8 and do a true middle school concept. And so that's a problem that the steering committee is wrestling with. And then lastly, at the elementary levels, because of our overcrowding, we don't have proper spaces for our music. We don't have proper spaces for some of our programs for students with special needs because we've overcrowded some of those spaces. And so to say that overcrowding is a problem is yes, but it's not as easy as just saying, okay, we'll build an addition to house 5 more classrooms, which gives us 120 more kids. We still have to consider the common areas like the gyms and the cafeterias and the libraries. All of those things have to go into consideration. And so those are the types of problems that the steering committee is wrestling with. And then we also lack green space in terms of practice facilities for our kids, for band, and those types of things. So those are the major kind of overarching concepts that the steering committee has been discussing.
I hesitate to bring this up, but I'm just thinking, you mentioned the parking, and one of the things that I think is extremely important to consider is why I said early on that that new land that they purchased was so valuable, is that if we go to, and you're going to see my bias on this, but if you go to adding on to the high school with a field house and with auditorium, one of the things we already lack is parking. You're going to take away parking to do that. Now, we already have kids walking across, like a college campus, walking across the road, over Game Farm Road, every day, which you would alleviate if you had a new school that could add all the things that you said, a 912 building out at that new beautiful facility that's got over 100 acres of land that could add future schools out there as well. Adequate facilities for athletics, parking, everything. And then over here, you still have the logistical problems of dealing with middle schools and intermediate schools, but possibly the current middle school that is over 1,000 people right now could split up with the high school that is over here and make that, as Doctor said, a 6, 7, 8 building. Possibly you could use the intermediate school and the current academy as another intermediate school and reduce the overcrowding at the elementary school. So there's a trickle-down effect on that, but I don't have the answers to that. All I know is that in the 46 years that we've been here, we've been very pleased with the program at Yorkville. Our 5 kids had very successful programs here and been very pleased with the growth. The only thing I was not pleased with is that how tough it was to ever get anything that was big enough to go to the future. We're just lucky enough to get ourselves above water and then something else dumped on top of it because it was already overcrowding. And we can see the overcrowding coming because it's coming from the east, and that's where I had my previous life. And I know that the benefits of what you're going through right now could be great. And I think that this could be the most beneficial thing that you could have done for this community if you take the time to plan this right and use the facilities that you have and the new land that you got, because I think it was a great buy. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You want to be a guest speaker at the next steering committee meeting?
That's not my territory. I'm too old for that now.
That was pretty good, though.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
No, I totally agree that buying that land's fine. It's going to alleviate all the mess of this game farm traffic every morning driving back and forth, because whoever thought that in the first place was mistaken. All the schools' parking lots are a mess. My only concern is the taxes. Our taxes are already way too high, and if you're going to tell me you're going to raise my taxes to build a new school, then we're going to have problems. And I'm guessing the community as a whole is going to have problems. Until you got, and that's more the city of Yorkville trying to figure out how, but most of that money goes to the schools. We need a pool. We need a field house. We need more parking. We need a real high school. The high school now should be the second middle school that we need. The freshman academy should become Yorkville grade, and Yorkville grade is past its living lifespan. Make that another parking lot for whatever, but that should be the new high school, and I live right there. I'm not really a big fan of living next to the high school, but that makes the most sense for Yorkville. You guys need to figure out how to do that within your own means and not raise my taxes.
Thank you. Yes.
My turn?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'm the one person maybe that trumps Jerry here, because I've been here 66 years, my entire life. And as far as living next to the high school, I'm just on the other side of the pasture. So I got a front row seat to everything. All the kids that do burnouts in the back parking lot. Even when the police department was right across the street, that happened. It's irritating, but it seems to stay in the parking lot, other than when they leave at the end of the day, but that's another story. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Zeidecker for setting this whole process up, because this has been fantastic. They mentioned about all these listening sessions being on YouTube. If you have not taken the opportunity to listen through some of those, I strongly encourage you to do that and hear what your other peer people from the community have to say about this stuff, because I listened to the first one and it was eye-opening. I have a grandson who's special needs, and listened to the ECD one, early childhood, before I came here tonight, and that was equally eye-opening. There are needs in this district, and this administration, I think, has done a fantastic job of trying to meet those within a budget. And as you saw from Craig earlier, they've done that. They're not running deficits. They're running surpluses at this point because we haven't spent the money yet on the infrastructure that we need. Having lived through the process of all these schools, well, first of all, having gone through most of those schools that were built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, having lived through the development of these newer schools that have come on board, Jerry's right. Everything that was built in the 1990s was done on a shoestring. How can we do this at raising our taxes the least? If you've been through the high school, the hallways are very crowded. They're very narrow. I don't see any way how this can really be a top-notch high school facility in its current structure without doing massive renovations. And then we're still landlocked with all the other problems that we talked about. I think the process that the district is going through is very prudent. I think it's smart. I think we need to do that. Again, having lived close to this, Granted, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids don't make smart decisions, but tomorrow morning, if you stood out here, you will see most of the kids that are walking into this high school wearing hoodies. And pajama pants. So, you know, and some of them in shorts too, in flip-flops. But part of the reason for that is they don't have lockers in here unless they request them because there aren't enough to go around. So all those kids, whatever they need for the day is going on their back. And they don't want to carry a big puffy down coat because they're going to have to carry it throughout the day. They're going to have to put that on to go from Yorkville Academy back to Yorkville High School. It's just a terrible situation for these kids. We've got to do better as a community. We've got to have thoughtful and responsive development of facilities across the board. The firm that's the district is working with, you know, God bless you, because this is a heck of a Rubik's Cube that you're going to have to solve.
Puzzle to solve.
And it may be the only one like this in the whole state, if not the whole country. But, you know, it's got to be done. I think as a community, we need it. We deserve it to do it and do it right. And one thing I will say about the purchase of the land, you can carp on that if you want. But with all the announced data center projects going in this community, if they hadn't bought that land at the price that they bought it for when they bought it, you'd be paying, I would bet, twice that much if we sold it this year.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else? We're not trying to keep you all night, so just want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk because it's important. And you know, the process is deliberately long because without the conversation, the outcomes are perhaps short-sighted. Maybe to your point, I'm not suggesting that anyone, you know, prior to this administration did something on a short-sighted basis, but I think it's necessary to have this community conversation and recognize that there are challenges so that we can solve it together. That's really the goal. The goal is to solve it as a community.
One other thing I forgot to mention. Having been a lifelong member of the community, I really would like to see us stick with one high school if at all possible, because I think it brings unity to the community. I really don't want to see Yorkville North, Yorkville South, Yorkville East, Yorkville West. I want to see Yorkville 115.
Just a quick question on that land we bought. Is there an easement to connect it to the current school here if we needed to? Like if you wanted to build there, can you access the fields through easement ways?
Really good question. Right now, the answer is no to that. There's the Polish National Society right there on River Road owns the property that would essentially prevent it from connecting those two pieces of land. So it's not long, but there is another owner in between.
Thank you.
So we're years out from a new school, wherever that might be. What are we gonna do while we're waiting? Because I'm at the middle school. We are bursting. So what are there also some, I mean, I worked at the academy for that 1 year before we moved over, and we had carts plus mobiles, and I really don't want to see that happen, but I feel like we're gonna have to have some in between.
Yeah.
So is that also like, what does that look like? When will we hear about those plans to just bridge us to the, because it'll take years. Once we decide to build and then break ground and then get it done, that's still 4 or 5 years out. So
Yeah, so we are working on temporary solutions. So we're going to examine student enrollment for next year and then working with Craig and Heather in terms of what those solutions are. The tricky is we don't want to make them too permanent because we don't know what the plan is going to lead us to in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But we certainly have to offer some relief. So we are working on those certainly at the buildings that are even in more need. They're all in need, but there are a few buildings that have a little bit more pressing needs. So some of those solutions aren't going to be ones that we probably all love, but some things that we may have to do to bridge where we're at to where we're going.
Thank you.
this will not be your last time to share. So if you think of something when you leave here tonight, you can certainly email, go to the district website and email. Oh, yeah. All right, perfect. Look at that. And I'm not trying to cut you short. If anyone has anything, please, by all means, we're willing to stay as long as you are. But oftentimes you leave and you say, oh, geez, I wish I would have asked that question. So please take advantage of reaching out via email. And what we'll do is we'll try to incorporate a question that comes up via email either on the frequently asked questions, which should be posted shortly on the website, or during our next listening tour, we'll use that and read that out loud so that you can hear your question being responded to, and then get that up on the website. So
The QR code will take you right to the facilities page on the website. So if you scan that, that's where the frequently asked questions will end up going after we've gone through several listening sessions now. We're getting some of those questions. That will be a living document that we change and update as we go through the process. And then mine and Craig and Heather's email address is right there. Please reach out with questions, comments. This is going to be, an iterative process. And so the continual feedback loop is going to be really important as we come to some decisions. So with that, we do want to thank you for your engagement tonight. The conversation has been fantastic. Thank you for coming out tonight. And like Pat alluded to, come this spring, there are going to be more opportunities once we start looking at larger options for the community to respond to.
So our next kind of community at large idea exchange will be more of a community design charrette. The intent is to have you come in and start looking at some of the options that are under consideration, put them on a table. Right now, the steering committee, I think we're up to almost 10 different iterations and options, going obviously from early childhood all the way through high school. So those meetings will be a little more interactive, less us talking, more of us working in small groups. It'll actually be kind of fun. I say it's fun. Every time I say it's fun, everybody laughs at me, but I do it for a living, so I guess I think it's fun. But it'll be a great opportunity for you to kind of, put your thumbprint on this plan and be part of the future for 115. So thank you very much for attending tonight.